Since the first one has been received rather well, people asked me to do more. So here's 7 more Super Nintendo games that changed my life. And I'm gonna start off with the one that you should have seen coming, because apparently I knew it was gonna be hotly contested because it's Final Fantasy. Let's talk about Final Fantasy VI. Don't get me wrong, as much as I love 4, I love Final Fantasy VI just as much. They hold equal place as the two of the best Final Fantasies that have ever been. 6 had so much story in it, they couldn't finish all the plot lines that they put in place. There's so much story pipe that they ran out of room. And just everything about this game was an experience. From, the beginning and the multiple characters that got introduced to the world of Ruin and just everything about Final Fantasy VI. I mean, I just adore it. And, the choosing and whether to get the Moogle or not, and, the Moogle battles, and just running around trying to collect all of Go's moves, and everything with Cyan and Doma, which, of course, if you play Final Fantasy XIV, it's hard to put into words what those two games together mean and the memories that I have of them. With 6, it goes back to my father and us climbing Kefka Tower together, and the shenanigans that happened with that, and getting Ultima, and just all the memories. It will always hold a very, very warm place in my heart. Next, may be a surprise, or maybe not. It depends on if you've been paying attention over the last, 6 months. But one of my... Let's talk about Secret of Evermore, okay? I love Secret of Mana, don't get me wrong. Second Denetsu is a fantastic series, the action RPGs, with the first one and later iterations. Legend of Mana, I love, and I may bring that up in a later video when I cover PlayStation. I'm probably going to do this with PlayStation, and of course I'm going to do it with the NES. But let's talk about Secret Evermore for a minute, okay? This is Square at its weirdest, when they were getting a little experimental and trying some things, and I adore this game. It was way too short. Way too short. It should have been longer. I wish they'd remake it and complete it, or make a sequel, or both. Make an extended version of the original and then make a sequel and go back to this world, because there was stuff here. And that Final Fantasy IV cameo, come on. Just the things with the crafting and running around with your pet and going to the different worlds, and there's something about Secret Evermore that I just love. And it inspired me in a way that other games didn't when it came to thinking about the stories I wanted to tell, because I was an aspiring game designer, writer, and I did some work in the industry, very low level for different companies, doing some writing and stuff. It's all in the past now, of course, with the game journalism, and of course now the content creation. But Secret of Evermore was just this weird game that just made the creative juice in my brain boil a little bit, and I wanted more. And unfortunately, we didn't get more. But Secret of Evermore just... It's what was really great about the Super Nintendo, was the companies were doing weird things and experimenting with their games that you don't really see as much anymore outside of the indie scene. But, now we're going to go to the next one, which, I mean, come on. Have you seen my channel? Have you seen my streams on Twitch? Harvest Moon started it, okay? And, of course, now Story of Seasons is remaking a lot of the classic Harvest Moon titles in a way that's just amazing. And Harvest Moon, well, the games made under Harvest Moon with Natsume now are, well, let's not be negative. But Harvest Moon introduced a genre of cozy, relaxed farming, date sim, life sim, taking care of animals, and just something that you could just do play for a couple hours, feel like you accomplished something, and you were able to chill. With other RPGs and other games of the era, like smashing things in Turtles in Time, or Mario Kart and having fun with the battle royale there, and Pilot Wings, and all the other games that are great on the Super Nintendo. Harvest Moon was something different that didn't require a whole lot of energy, but you could still spend hours just immersed in the world, relaxing. Which is funny that I mention it, because we go from this, somewhat easier title to one of the hardest RPGs I ever played that I adore to this day, that I've discovered not many people know. And that's Endo Way of the Ninja from Koei. Which, if you go back and you play the game now, you see a lot of DNA for games that have come later. Okay? And there's, the dungeon crawling and the fighting. But then there's recruiting other, ninjas and others to join your party. There's espionage, infiltrating enemy castles. There's battles where you're leading troops. Hello, Sekiden. You see the DNA of later games from other publishers in this game. And this game was not easy. At least for me, when I was a kid, I found it not easy. I ended up playing through it with the Game Shark codes because it was just like that. Okay, don't judge me. I wanted to see more, and I got roadblocked several times on a vanilla playthrough that I had to I wanted to see where it went. And I've gone back to it years later, and it's still fucking hard, but it's so good. And if you want to go back to a time when games were difficult, I mean, I'm not talking like Battletoads, oh my god, but you want to experience something different and see where some of the games you play now came from, this is one you want to go back and play if you have the opportunity. It informed the choices I make now of the games that I really like. All of these titles do, but this one was a gateway drug to other things. Next, this one is very RPG heavy, and Super Mario RPG is on that list. Of course, I could, go on and on about Super Mario games, starting from the first one on NES to where we are today. And that should be a no-brainer, and everybody does it, and I understand it. Mario RPG was something different from Nintendo that, it's now getting remade. I'm looking forward to it. I want to play the hell out of it when it hits the Switch. That's going to be amazing. But for what it was, it took Mario in a new direction with a new story, and we got some interesting characters, some interesting gameplay, and it showed the flexibility and what you could do with beloved characters and take them in new directions, which we're seeing now all the time. And you see what, later with the Mario Rabbids, that's kind of a spiritual successor of Mario RPG, kind of, sort of. But it was just a new adventure with Mario in a way we hadn't seen before that was just fun. Because, I mean, sure, we had Mario Kart and we were doing silly things with Mario Paint, and there was the Mario learning games, and I can't remember if Mario Baseball had come out on Super Nintendo or not. It's been a minute. But Mario RPG was just something weird, and it was an RPG, and it was just fun. And, it just changed my perspective on, this is where we have our characters. Let's do something different with them. And it showed that you could do that. And weird things come from experiments. And last but not least, in this run of 7, may not be a game. I know certain people, friends especially, who know this one, and that's Shadowrun, the cyberpunk RPG weirdness that had come out. Of course, tabletop RPG folks know Shadowrun. This was something else. Pardon the pause. It came home. Anyway, talk about weird experimental stuff. Shadowrun was weird and glitchy, and it was an RPG but had, the early fingerprints of hacking and weird creatures and gunplay, and it was something that, a kid of the 80s movies we were growing up with when it came out in the early 90s, it was okay, this is something I could get into. And I don't think I ever completed it, but it gave me a taste of what was to come, especially now where we live in a world with cyberpunk and the Ascent and other, lots of other cyberpunk games and movies. Like, this was something completely unique and different for its time, and I was there for it. And like all of these games and the previous 7 and other ones I'm going to highlight from either other systems or maybe even another 7 Super Nintendo games, because I could go on for days. Turtles in Time and Lufia 2 and Breath of Fire. There's just so much I could talk about. And I'm gonna feel really silly because this wasn't the last one. I told you, I generally don't edit these things. I just go with them, and we're gonna go to the last one. Romance of the Three Kingdoms 4 Wall of Fire. Here, another Koei game, of course, which I couldn't find a big enough picture of the box art, and that's fine. The Three Kingdoms franchise. As much as I love Nobunaga's ambition, and I adore Genghis Khan too, Romance of the Three Kingdoms series I played over multiple platforms, and even the newest ones that have been out on PC, which have been fantastic. I think my favorite of the franchise is probably Wall of Fire on Super Nintendo. It was, everything I wanted in that type of game at its time and later. And, it's just, you had the Three Kingdoms period of time in China, building your army, conquering towns, building them up, getting your officers. Your officers had different talents and skills, and they commanded different troops, and you could have battles, and you were finding upgrade items, like, to gift to them to keep their loyalty, and there was intrigue, and, it's like the opposite side of Inindo, which, of course, it makes sense when you think about the company that made both these games. Inindo was a test field for certain things, and then Romance and Genghis Khan 2 took the other side of that and made full games, which is why later on you see them experimenting yet again with the Dynasty Warrior games and all those things that come later. There was something about these kinds of strategy games that just really made it interesting for me. And it's, engaged my brain in ways that obviously school when I was a kid didn't. And as much as I adored books, there were other things that just worked better. And so here we are with this final one of these 7. It actually is the 7th one now. The Super Nintendo, yes, the NES, when I was a kid, it brought the world of video games home more so to me in my mind than the Atari 2600 did, even though I had that first. And there's some games on there that I loved. They weren't as impactful as the NES, but the Super Nintendo is what really made the world of video games explode in a way that the NES hadn't. And while I'm going to do an NES list, and of course some of the big hits are going to be on, the big RPG hits are going to be on there and some other ones, the Super Nintendo just changed gaming for me. And I played the Sega too, the Sega Master System, the Sega Genesis. There are games on those that I adore, but I was a Nintendo kid. And the Super Nintendo had the games I wanted to play, especially a lot of the RPGs. ActRaiser 2, Sword of the Seven Stars. I'm trying to think of titles now. Terra Enigma. But yeah, I have to think about those, some of these titles, and it's just, Seventh Saga. Of course, Link to the Past. I did not put Link to the Past on either of these lists because everybody talks about Zelda. And I loved Link to the Past, and I loved The Legend of Zelda. But Link to the Past is my favorite Zelda game, but it wasn't as impactful as the rest of these titles were in my overall gaming experience. So, but there's always more. I mean, people talk about SimCity 2000 and Utopia Populous, all the action games and the game crossover, like the movie titles, although the NES had some of the better, in my opinion, some of the better movie tie-in games. Ultimately, I think the Super Nintendo affected me more profoundly as a kid and my taste in video games than any other system has. PlayStation reinforced it, NES started it, but Super Nintendo is what really developed the gamer that I am. The only thing that changed later would be my love of MMOs, and that's a whole other conversation. So, thanks for listening to me go on about games again, including my screw up and all the interruptions. God, I love video games. Like, I've grown up with them over my entire life. That's the benefit of being a latter-day Gen X. And, elder millennials know the same feeling. And all Gen X does, really. But coming up from arcade to home console, NES, Master System, Super Nintendo, Genesis, Dreamcast, the PlayStation, the N64, GameCube, the list goes on and on. All those things, ColecoVision and television. We grew up in a magical time when the world changed and the face of entertainment changed. And for me, it was the Super Nintendo that changed everything more than anything else. And that's why now, as a content creator and playing the games that I do, it's because of this passion I have for video games that has entertained me my entire life, that going back and looking back at how I got to where I am now is something I'm enjoying doing, and people seem to be resonating with that. So I hope you stick around for more of the series and for just the games that I play and review and the streams and stuff, and do the things. Fucking like and describe. So like and describe. Like and subscribe to the channel. We'll keep doing the things as long as you guys keep watching and liking and commenting and discussing with me about games that we love or games that we disagree about. I'll keep making videos and streaming and doing all the things. So, I'll catch you later. Play a good game today.